They say you can't polish a turd, but what about a 1964 tool stamp? This P40B started as a clunky vintage relic with more flash than detail. I've got the base colors down, but it looks like a toy. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact weathering secrets I used to turn this dinosaur into a battle-worn flying tiger that looks like it's seen 100 sorties. The first thing that I want to demonstrate is how to feather paint. And so the way that I do this is I use a 400 grit sandpaper glued to a coffee stirrer, dip it in water, and then work in circular motions. To check that I have the feathering complete, I often run the back of my fingernail or thumbnail between the two surfaces from low to high, and if I feel a catch at all, then I know that it's not complete. Now to finish this process, I'll use Mr. Surfacer 1000, and I like to paint from the low surface to the high surface to create that smooth transition. Oftentimes I will dip my brush in the thinner before I dip it into the primer, and this allows the paint to flow smoother through the brush onto the surface. If this differs from your technique, leave a comment and let me know, how do you do this? How do you create transitions between other two surfaces? The next step is to paint the interior green. So if you watched the first video, and I hope you'll go back and watch it if you haven't, because this is a third-party cockpit, we needed to use some green stuff to create a mold transition, we'll say, between the third-party cockpit and the fuselage. And so we've primed that, and now we're ready to paint that interior green. Now we're working on a series of light coats of the final base coat. And I like to apply that very thin, one after the other, allowing it to dry in between to minimize the brush strokes. Now I'm going to use AK Camouflage Plastic Putty to protect the interior of the cockpit so that I can go ahead and airbrush the entire model in the bottom base coat first, and then we'll give the top of the plane its base coat. One little pro tip that I learned here is I should have put some foam inside the cockpit, because as this plastic putty set for a while on my stand, it actually melted itself inside. It thankfully didn't stick to anything and came out pretty easy, but that's just a little pro tip. So here we're painting the bottom of this with Vallejo Model Air. It's called a Sky Blue, and you can see the model number in the lower right hand corner there. And now we're going to go ahead and paint the base coat of green, and you can see that I used some Tamiya masking tape and then also more of that camo putty from AK to create that transition line between the two surfaces. And now we're ready to paint the top side of the model. This is one of the most satisfying aspects, in my opinion, of painting, is watching the transition to its first true base coat color. Now we're ready to paint the interior of the wheel wells and the landing gear wells with interior chromatic green. Also, the flaps and the underside of the wings would be the same color. We're going to paint that as well. On to another one of my favorite parts, which is laying down the camo pattern. So you can see I generously applied the AK Camo Putty to the model. I mimic the shapes of the camo to the best of my ability from the diagram and the instruction booklet. The nice thing about using this AK Putty is it does give you a place to hold on to the model as you are laying down the camo color. I also like the edge that it creates between the two colors. And then the removal process is so very satisfying as you see the model come to life with its camo pattern. I'll see if I can get you a better view of that by giving a better background here. And I think that looks pretty darn good myself. Let me know what you think in the comments. For this next part, only use adult supervision. We're heating a dental tool, and we're going to create a hub to keep the wheel from falling off by simply melting the plastic on the landing gear. Now we're going to go ahead and move to painting the interior of the landing gear doors. And again, we're using Vallejo Model Air 71-137, which is interior green, or I believe it's also called Zinc Chromate. I'm painting that on the tree just to make life a little easier. And now I'm attaching the essentially hubcap for the landing gear there to cover up the plastic work that we did earlier. And also this gets a nice decal later on. Here I'm using a piece of foam just to hold the landing gear door in place as the glue dries. That's kind of a little pro tip. I will stack foam around that. And now I'm using Tamiya masking tape to go ahead and mask around the exhaust so that I can create or paint the exhaust actually fairly aggressively. And now we're ready to paint the exterior portion of the landing gear doors with the sky blue Vallejo paint. So I like to paint anything that I'm going to have is color red or yellow. I'm going to start by painting it white instead of painting the red over the black. I think this creates a lot more uniform color. So we're going to go ahead and get that nose cone painted, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And now that that's dried, we're ready to go ahead and apply some flat red to the cone, and I've already applied that to the model itself. And the way this particular piece is assembled, there's a part that's glued and applied. You can see it there in this picture here. And now we're ready to apply the decals. So I've put a model setting solution down first, but I forgot to film that stage, so I'm actually just going to show how I do that now. I do measure these out to make sure that they're exactly the same distance on each side and that the decals are in the correct spot. And here, this is how I apply the model setting solution. And I do that before I apply each decal. And so, for example, on this Tiger, I applied that model setting solution ahead of time, and then I apply the decal. And from my experience, I can add a necessary amount of water to move the decals around to get that done. Now I'm rescribing the panel lines on the wings, and also we'll be adding some of the rivets. And I like to use a straight edge for this. Sometimes I'll use tape. It kind of depends on how much detail I need to add, but in this case there wasn't a lot, and I'm going to do quite a bit of weathering here. This is a rivet marking tool, and I'm going to use this to reapply the rivets. Now this model does come with raised rivets, and I'm actually going to create indented rivets for this particular part. There is a process of using hairspray and soldering beads to create raised rivets, but in this particular case I wasn't that concerned about it with this model, as I'm going to do quite a bit of weathering in the next steps. Here I'm using an AK sand colored pencil, and I'm going to create its first layer of weathering, since this was in a very sandy environment, and it actually will be as part of a diorama in the end. And basically using the edge of the pencil, I run it across the surface, and those raised rivet lines and raised panel lines will pick that up and create a dust effect. And then we'll go ahead and lock that in with a coat of varnish. One other little pro tip here, and you'll see me do this, is I like to use a toothbrush to knock off any excess pencil markings if I get too aggressive. They do wipe off pretty easy, so just a little tip there. Now that we've got that applied, we're going to go ahead and lock that in with this Vallejo polyurethane varnish. And it'll lock in the decals too, and it'll put our first coat of flat on the plane. And we just basically roughly mask off that cockpit for that. Now I'm ready to do some oil weathering. So for this, I'm going to use 4 different colors on my palette. And one thing that I will note is I will put these on the cardboard for at least an hour prior to applying them to the plane. This allows it to leach out the excess linseed oil that's in the oil paints. Allows it to mix a little richer with the mineral spirits that we'll use later. And I used a sponge effect to create these wear lines, and then I've come back with quite a bit of that knocked off. Essentially, I ran the sponge across the paper towel to create a very dry brush technique, and then you can see I'm lightly able to apply scratches with the sponge now, which is a very desired effect because these wear patterns would definitely, from the reference images, have kind of micro scratches around them, so this works pretty well for that purpose. And the pilot gets in on that left wing more so than others, or the other side. I believe only the maintenance crew is on the other side, and that's why the left wing is always worn. Here I created a little dimple where the pilot would often step up in, and I saw this on a couple reference images, and so I'm using this black accent that again, this is our oil paint here, and I'm filling that in so that I create that color change where the pilot would have stepped in and out of the plane. And then we're also just going through the recessed panel lines to create a series of layered effects. So what you'll see me do is start with black here, and then I'm going to clean it up, and then I'm going to come back with the darker color yellow there on the palette. I believe that's like a yellow ochre, and then I'll finally come back with sand. And the reason that I'm applying this in layers is I want to create the natural tones that exist in the reference images. Again, most of those are in black and white, but you can infer from those that there's a natural tonal variation in these recessed areas of the plane. So we'll just lightly come back and fill those in, and that black in combination then with the varying layers of color each layer kind of seeps through the other, and it creates a very textured blended approach that turns out looking really good in the end. And now we're applying the sand color, or coral I believe this is called, which actually looks a lot like sand to me. And I actually like to use this sand color over the entire surface of the plane, and since we have the varnish having locked in the AK weathering, this actually provides a really good way to create some dusty streaks on the plane. And then we'll come back with a lightly, very, very lightly dampened paper towel that has some mineral spirits. And sometimes you can just paint just a few spots of mineral spirits on the plane, and then come back and wipe that off to blend all of that together and create the effect that you're looking for. And then the final process for this particular phase is I really like this Vallejo weathering fluid. It's a white weathering fluid, and I find that this allows me to create a very oxidized look for the paint. And I just generously apply that, and here we are with the final images. So let me know what you think, and please leave me a like, and please subscribe. Definitely happy to receive comments, even the negative ones. To me, this is a learning process, and I'm just trying to show folks how I build models, and hopefully it'll help out a beginner, and maybe even somebody that's been doing this for a while may learn an alternative technique. So I appreciate you watching the video, and I'll leave you with some music to finish out the images. Thanks, and have a blessed day.